Good evening, I am Luqman Hariz and this is Market Talk. Behind every great feat, there's always an unsung hero. Now, the next time you get on a plane and you are still able to stay connected, that unsung hero making it possible behind the scenes may just be Inmarsat, set up in 1979 to help ships at sea stay in touch for emergencies or to call for help. Inmarsat has, over the years, diversified its focus to many different sectors. Today, operating 13 communication satellites, which form the backbone of a global satellite communications network, Inmarsat now focuses on 5 market-facing business units, spanning from government to enterprise to aviation. Their goal is simple: to ensure that you are connected at all times, no matter where you are. Joining me today is Otto Gergye. He is Inmarsat's Vice President of the Asia-Pacific region. Otto, welcome to Market Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First of all, tell us about the company, Inmarsat.
Yeah. As you mentioned in your intro, Inmarsat has been dedicated to connecting people in extreme situations, in extreme locations where conventional communications are not available. Since 1979, Inmarsat has done this via satellites in all regions around the world, spanning from governmental organisations to maritime. And now, in the past few years, one of our big focus areas has been aviation, especially communication and Wi-Fi for passengers in the aircraft cabin.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment. Yeah, as you've mentioned, over the years, it has grown and diversified its business. It's now involved in government, enterprise, aviation, besides maritime. How has the journey been for the company?
Well, the journey has been very, very good. Inmarsat has always focused on providing communication. And as the focus, I believe in business, if you focus on what you're good at and you continue investing in that, as Inmarsat has done, you do see the results with Inmarsat being consistently profitable and doing very, very well in all of its markets as far as connecting people in extreme situations go. And that's what Inmarsat does, and that's what Inmarsat is known for.
Being the VP of Asia-Pacific region, specifically, how has it been for the Asia-Pacific region for Inmarsat, and also what kind of growth potential do you see in this region?
Well, if we stick to the aviation part, we see this is the biggest growth region as far as aircraft numbers go. We see forecasts of aircraft numbers here in Asia-Pacific going from the current 6,000 to 7,000 aircraft, commercial aircraft that are flying around, right up to about 17,000 in the next 10 to 15 years, which is a huge, huge number of aircraft. Now, we also see that, as we see all around the world, and in all of our encounters with communication, people want to be connected no matter where they are. And that is now becoming very true for people sitting on airplanes.
Yeah, and it's not just, the practical application of these things. It's also the need to be a thought leader in this respect. You mentioned before, even before the show started, that people want to be able to do the normal things that they are able to do on the ground, in the air. And Wi-Fi is a good example. Do you think our airlines are not doing this fast enough?
Well, the technology, quite simply, hasn't been there. We, as leaders of mobile communications with our satellite network and our close to 30 years of experience, have allowed us to develop GX, which is our in-cabin Wi-Fi system. So we have satellites that were built specifically to connect people in the aircraft while they're flying from A to B at 36,000 feet. So the technology hasn't been there. There is connectivity out there, but not at the level and not at the quality that Inmarsat offers. So the only way people will actually start using a service is when they can rely on it to work all of the time and at the same time as on the ground. So people will not pay for a service. Airlines will not invest in a service, but work sometimes, but work in some places. Connectivity, as we've come to know on the ground, it needs to work everywhere. That's what we're accustomed to. And if someone says to me, I'm going to be flying on an airline that has connectivity, I expect it to work all of the time when I'm on that airplane. And that's what Inmarsat and the GX satellites that we have specifically developed for this market offer. So that is the big leap forward that just wasn't there a few years ago.
Indeed, a survey that you've done recently shows that 61% of people consider Wi-Fi, in-flight Wi-Fi, more important than in-flight entertainment itself. As you mentioned, the technology is there and Inmarsat is championing this. But if I want to focus just on Asia-Pacific Airlines or even Malaysian Airlines, has the adoption been a bit sluggish?
Well, the adoption, if we have a look in Asia-Pacific, Air New Zealand is one of our first customers in this part of the world. So their aircraft will have it later this year, around October, November. It hasn't been sluggish at all. Again, we launched GX in October last year. That's when it became live. So we're in the first year of its operation. So it is not sluggish. Again, it's very, very new technology, and it also takes a new way of thinking. You need to invent how to engage and how to interact with your passengers. And that's where we want to be thought leaders in not only installing the technology, but working with airlines to say how they can integrate this into their existing product portfolio. And the number that you mentioned, where the majority of respondents to our survey say that it's more important than in-flight entertainment, we do so much on our phones these days. We communicate with people. If you're a businessman flying around the region, you can do your emails on the airplane. You don't get off an airplane and you have 25 emails that you haven't read, that you need to work on your way home to your family or on your way to the office after a 2 or 3 hour flight. You can actually use that time to better the quality of the time that you have available to do these things. Otherwise, I mean, what technology should be doing is it should enhance and make our lives more efficient. And when you have connectivity on an aircraft, that's exactly what it does. It allows you to make better use of your time.
You know, before we go any further, I just want to go back to a very rudimentary level. For the layman out there, I think most people know how mobile cellular connections or networks work on the ground. But if you have to put it very briefly and you have to explain to people, how does Wi-Fi work in the sky, Otto?
Okay, so there's a satellite, or actually 4 in our case. There's an antenna on the aircraft. The antenna hooks up with the satellite. The satellite beam goes with the aircraft, and the antenna then distributes the satellite of a connectivity within the cabin through a cabin network. So that's basically how it works.
All right, we'll take a short break. We'll come back with Otto Gergye. He's Inmarsat's VP for the Asia-Pacific region. Market Talk. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Market Talk. With me, Luqman Hariz. I've been speaking to Otto Gergye. He is Inmarsat's Vice President of the Asia-Pacific region. Otto, welcome again to the show. Thanks for sticking around. Let's talk about Inmarsat's partners in your business. You've recently had collaborations with the likes of Honeywell, Thales, Sit on Air. Tell us more about your collaborations.
Well, Honeywell make the antenna, the jet wave antenna that we need to have on the aircraft to receive the satellite signal. Quite simply put, and Honeywell is one of the leaders in avionics. So they do a lot of flight deck equipment. So they have substantial experience in this part of the business, and we use their antenna exclusively for our GX in-flight Wi-Fi.
So how have these partners added value, brought value to your business?
Well, Honeywell also does a lot of cockpit communications. They are experts in avionics. They have very, very established relationships in the aviation industry. So there's a lot of collaboration that we're able to do with Honeywell. For the likes of the connected aircraft these days produce a lot of data when they're flying, and this is not to be confused with critical flight deck communications, but maintenance data when something needs to be changed, or just how the aircraft is flying and what's happening. This data then gets relayed back, and GX can be used as such for non-critical data collection. And we do this with Honeywell, who have substantial experience in this.
Now focusing specifically towards Malaysia, you've also recently had a collaboration with AirAsia, our low-cost carrier, for AirAsia to upgrade its in-flight broadband. Tell us more what this is about.
We've signed an MOU with AirAsia, and we're working together with AirAsia to turn that MOU into something a little bit more binding. And I think what we're seeing around the world is, with airlines, what reliable in-flight connectivity offers is an enhanced service. If you're a legacy carrier, it's something that will be a key differentiator when selecting the airline that you fly with. So we've seen that for Malaysia specifically, 25% of respondents said they will change airlines, and it will be a deciding factor if the airline has connectivity. Many of our respondents have also said that they're willing to pay for this connectivity. Now, if you're a low-cost carrier, or a carrier that is dependent on ancillary revenue, this is a great ancillary to have. It enhances the product offering that you are giving to your passengers. It's always available, unlike meals, where you have logistics, where you're on a flight and you want to have the chicken sandwich, but they're all out of chicken sandwiches and they only have the cheese sandwich. They never run out of in-flight connectivity. So it's always something that you can offer to your passengers. And of course, airlines that are driven by ancillary revenue have a very good opportunity to make a margin here. And it's a little bit different to other ancillaries, where on some airlines you get your bags for free, or today my bags were for free, but tomorrow I have to pay for it at the same airline. You're like, hold on. Where with Wi-Fi, you're getting a new service that's like, wow, I'm happy to pay for this. So it enhances your journey.
Yeah, you know this. I mean, AirAsia being a low-cost carrier, I think it's a safe assumption to assume that most consumers would want to, of course, go for low cost and save money. And this is one of the things that is going to go into the ancillary part of things. But how confident are you of the growth and take-up opportunities collaborating with a low-cost carrier, knowing that most of the passengers want, this is the cheapest price and the basic levels of service?
Yeah, well, if we have a look at low-cost carriers generally around the world, they are the masters of additional revenue. How to market that, how to email, customers to get them to buy things. I mean, we've all flown low-cost airlines before, and before we even check in, we receive many emails about services that the airline can offer. Once from the website, fast track at the airport. Do we need additional bags? Do we need bags at all? Do we want a meal? Do we want to buy magazine subscriptions?
Yeah.
So they have everything on offer around the world, and this will be one of the key ancillaries for airlines, because if you were to do the same survey that we did on Wi-Fi on in-flight meals, many people aren't so fussed about it. And yet, in-flight meals are one of the big ancillary drivers for low-cost airlines. I think that Wi-Fi will be far bigger.
Right. You mentioned that your collaboration with AirAsia is still at an MOU level. You're looking to get something probably more binding, and in the press release dated April this year, it says it's subject to final contracts. How optimistic are you that this will actually materialize?
Well, when I'm in Kuala Lumpur, as I am today, I'm always very optimistic. So we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it says here that installation is expected to commence this year, with the service to go live next year. Are you on track?
I would think so. I mean, I don't see anything to say, but we're not.
All right. Well, we'll return with Otto Gergye, Inmarsat's Vice President of the Asia Pacific region. I could talk with you right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Market Talk with me, Luqman Hariz. I've been speaking to Otto Gergye, Inmarsat's Vice President for the Asia-Pacific region, to talk about a lot of things, amongst others, the availability of Wi-Fi on airplanes. Inmarsat has a few satellites, currently 4, that enables that, and they're looking to increase their presence within local airlines, including AirAsia. Now, Otto, before we go on to more of the technical things, I mean, one of the most standard announcements that you hear when you get into an airplane is that switch off your phones because it may interrupt with the pilot's communications with the ATC or whatever, and that's of course meaning the cellular network. So now, making available Wi-Fi, how does this technology work as such that it does not interfere with the communications?
Well, the technology is designed to be completely independent of any of the flight deck instruments and for it not to interfere. So without going into too much complex detail, it is completely independent. It is a different antenna, and it will not interfere whatsoever with any of the flight deck or any of the critical communications or instruments that the aircraft has.
On that note, is it possible today to ensure that cellular networks or mobile networks in airplanes do not interrupt with the pilot's communications as well, because you can ensure that Wi-Fi does not?
I'm not an expert, but I mean, I think technology advances and it probably will be possible, but I'm probably not the best person to give you an opinion on that. So,
right, let's talk about Inmarsat's presence here in Malaysia. Of
Yep.
course, your HQ or in Asia Pacific is in Singapore.
Yes.
What kind of a presence do you have in Malaysia, and do you look to expand your presence here in this country?
Well, very much so. We're looking to expand our presence here in Malaysia. And us working together with AirAsia is a first step in that direction. So it is definitely a key market, aviation-wise, yes.
Although I know you cannot go into too much detail, but does that entail any physical increase of physical presence in Malaysia, taking employees, or maybe creating jobs for locals in the future for Inmarsat?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, as we grow and as we develop, we will need to have people based here. So that we're in the very, very early stages of building our business in Asia Pacific and, of course, in Malaysia.
The global passenger volume for global airlines and the load factor is expected to remain challenging for the quarters and for the years to come. Does this present any sort of risk to Inmarsat?
No, I don't think it does. And I think when we have a look at in-flight Wi-Fi, progressive airlines that we're talking to are taking this very, very seriously. And if you run your business well, you will do well. Looking at the passenger numbers and the demand in every region, but especially in the Asia-Pacific region, where you have double-digit year-on-year growth in big key markets. So if we have a look at China conservatively, passenger growth year-on-year is 10 to 14% conservatively. The same number in Europe is somewhere between 2 to 4%. And that's just China alone. And then you've got big markets here, for example, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, where we've seen undeterred growth for the past 10, 15 years as far as aviation goes. But even markets like Korea, Taiwan, Japan, the growth will continue. Maybe not in double digits, but it will still be a very, very healthy upwards curve.
Besides AirAsia here in Malaysia, are you also looking to collaborate, or are you approaching other airlines as well to provide your services?
Yes, of course. So we try to speak to as many airlines as possible. So that's what our sales team does in the region. And again, to help airlines understand the opportunity that in-flight Wi-Fi brings and what it actually does, and also to help them understand that it will be a key criteria. It will be a differentiator just as much, but more so than flatbeds were in business class or in-flight entertainment was in economy class 15, 20 years ago. So this will be a huge deciding factor when people go to book their flights, if there is Wi-Fi available to them on that flight or on that airline.
AirAsia aside, do you encounter challenges from this country's airlines when you tell them this is actually a growing trend and this is very important? are they very receptive to it, or do they just look at it as increasing costs?
Well, I'll give you another example. Online check-in today is taken for granted around the world, and if an airline can do it, it's probably the number one thing that they want to implement, because it enhances the passenger experience going through the airport, and it also lowers costs. So it's fantastic. But up until about even 2 or 3 years ago, I was having conversations with people within airlines in a previous role, where people said, well, no, we don't need online check-in. Why would you need online check-in? Or why do you need? And if I go back 10, 12 years, I was having arguments internally in an airline I worked, where people said, no, we don't need to be able to have passengers book online. It'll never take off. So you always have detractors and naysayers, and it is a bit of an evolution. But when you see the progressive airlines, the first movers, actually adopt it, and then you see the market follow. And I think if already today in a market where the in-flight Wi-Fi penetration is extremely low, in single digits, but you already have 25% of respondents saying today that, well, I'll switch airlines, or it is a key criteria for me that I have Wi-Fi available on board. I think the market will help with the thinking
will sway them in the right direction, nudge them in the right direction. Yeah. Very briefly, within aviation, within Asia Pacific, what's next for Inmarsat?
What's next for Inmarsat is helping our airline customers capitalize on the opportunity that is Wi-Fi, working with them, and being the #1 most reliable Wi-Fi provider for in-flight Wi-Fi in Asia Pacific.
Thank you so much, Otto.
Thank you for having me.
Vice President of the Asia Pacific region for Inmarsat. And that's it for this episode of Market Talk. Send us all your feedback on all our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and let us know what you think about this conversation. And don't forget, you can also listen to this interview on your podcast. Simply search for Astro Awani or Market Talk wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Luqman Hariz. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.